Welcome to the Story a Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy from storyaday.org, encouraging you to be a writer every day, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie from Story a Day here with another podcast for you. I don't know about you, but I was watching the Emmys on Monday night because I love an awards ceremony. It's one of those times when you get to see creative people having a really good day. Yes, it's subjective. Yes, they're kind of lucky. Yes, they've campaigned for it. No, most of us never get to have an experience like that, but I love it because I get to see people who have struggled and pursued something long beyond the point when anybody could have called it reasonable. It's not reasonable to spend your life pretending to be somebody else. It's not reasonable to throw away security and a livelihood working at a bank to go out to Hollywood and try and get somebody to notice you. It's not reasonable to be a fat black woman and expect to be a pop star. None of this is reasonable. And yet these people did it. And you get to watch them at these awards shows have like 60 seconds to express what it means to them, to be pursuing this, to be living this life, and to be recognized by their peers, sure, but it's their chance to have all of their struggle validated. So I love it, and I watch it, even though I'm not really a huge fan of us relying on moments of that, like that, to justify our existence as creatives. It's just kind of fun to watch it sometimes. I was watching the pre-Emmys show on E, the one with the red carpet, and Laverne Cox, who was pulling everybody in. Why am I talking about this on a writing podcast? Don't worry, I'm getting to it. So every time somebody came by, Laverne Cox was standing there in the fabulous Gautier outfit and saying to people, she was always obsessed with their work or their performance or their dress. Or, I'm obsessed with you. And I understand it's a vocal tic, it's an enthusiasm thing. It's probably a lovely way to be interviewed because they're only hearing that she's obsessed with them. But of course, the writing pedant in me was going, no, Laverne Cox, you're not obsessed with all of these things. You can't be obsessed with all of these things. It just doesn't make semantic sense. And I started thinking, though, about obsession. I have discovered, I started Story a Day back in May of 2010 for me. I wanted to be writing. I always had written, but as I grew up, life got busy and it was hard to make writing a priority. And then along came the web and a whole bunch of us writers found each other. And then we started supporting each other. And the web was still young in the 90s, and in the aughts. And we started creating things that supported ourselves and each other. And there were all these challenges. There was NaNoWriMo, there was Illustration Friday, there was, just so many of them. There was Poetry Month in April. And people were creating challenges and events around these things. And not because they were particularly qualified to do that. None of the people who created these things were experts or lauded or prize winners. They were people who understood that our culture doesn't make space for creativity anymore. And that is a terrible, terrible thing. And we understood that creative work, creative play needs to be encouraged, but it also is so professionalized. We've bought into this idea that only certain people are allowed to be creative. And those are the people you see on the Emmys. We've bought into this idea that you're only good if you're earning a living at your creativity. And only the thing that you earn a living at, and this is just in the last couple of generations, I don't think this existed before, really, in most realms of life.
we've bought into this idea that only your work matters, only the thing you earn money for, only the thing that you support your family with matters. That's the most important thing in your life. And you should take that seriously. And if you have to cut out everything else in your life to make your employer happy, then you should do that because they're paying you. And, that's how it is. That's not how it is. And it's not how it's been for most of human history. It's an 18th century idea, a 19th century idea. It came in with the Reformation. It came in with the Industrial Revolution, factory time, where people were expected to go to work at a certain time and come home at a certain time. And even when I was growing up, coming home at the end of the day still allowed adults time for other things. There was a big culture of evening classes when I was growing up. People, adults, not kids, adults would go and learn flower arranging, candle making, gardening in the evening at colleges, at schools, and they would take classes. Men had garden sheds that they would potter in the evenings. Women would go to sewing bees, things like that, or maybe they would garden, learn macrame. There was a lot of room for creativity. And somewhere in my lifetime, we've got away from that. And maybe culturally, wherever you are, it happened at different times. Maybe it was already like that when you were a kid. But I'm obsessed, Laverne Cox, with creativity. I'm obsessed with what happens when people give themselves permission. When people give themselves permission to write, to create, to make pottery, and to do it just because it makes them more fully human. I'm obsessed with bringing back permission and containers and support for you to come into and enjoy life in a very full way. If you want to go pro as a writer, if you want to write stories that get turned into screenplays, that get turned into Netflix series, awesome. That's great. But the first thing we have to do is give ourselves permission to write. And I do think I've been doing this for a while now, and I've watched what happens when people give themselves permission to show up and to write and to be creative. And it's hard because you've still got a family, you've still got friends, you've still got a house that needs looked after, you've still got food you need to buy, you've still got to earn a living or support the person in your life who is earning the cash so that you guys can have a life together. I realized after I set up Story a Day for myself that I was really good at motivating people. And I was pretty good at creating containers for people to come and be in and support each other in, to give each other and themselves, give each other, at first to give each other permission. You sort of borrow that permission from other people to spend time on your creativity. And what I see as the process goes on is that you start to take it on yourself. You no longer need other people to give you permission. You understand that this is something that's essential to living a good life, to living an on-purpose life, to living the life that you want. Creativity is not childish. It's childlike in the best possible way. We all know that children are creative, children are naturally inquisitive, children are little scientists, they're experimenters, they make up stories, they experiment with what happens if, what would it be like if, what would it be like if I was a princess, if I was a baseball star, if, they tell stories. They're not little idiots. Well, they are in some ways, but they're not little idiots. They are human, unfiltered, unpolluted by other people's stories of who they should be and what they should do. There are people working in the creative professions who are very, very good at storytelling, and good for them. There are people working in the creative professions who are, good for them. There are so many people over here who are living lives that should include creativity and don't, because they think that this group is the only one who's allowed to. If you're listening to this podcast, I know you don't really subscribe to that. I know that you have probably been attracted to this podcast because I say this kind of stuff all the time. And I'm really pushing it today because it's hard to keep that. It's hard to keep that certainty in your head when you have to take your earbuds out and go out into the world that tells you that only these people, only the professionals matter. No. I became obsessed over the years after running Story a Day for myself and then seeing other people come into it and then inviting people into groups and watching what happened to them. I became obsessed with the process of creating a writing life, how people do it and how different people do it. And I've been watching and learning and pushing and prodding people for 12 years, intensively for the past 4 or 5 years in the Superstars group. And I'm obsessed with helping you get there. Because I see what happens when people finish their first story or their 50th. I see what happens when people allow themselves time to write. I watch them discover that publishing isn't that important to them, or discover that publishing actually is kind of important to them and go out and pursue it. I watch them change their definition of success from somebody else's to something that is deeply meaningful to them in their everyday life. And none of that is the same for each person that I talk to. And you can't know what your vision of success, what your version of fulfillment is, if you're not pursuing writing, if you're not creating a process for yourself. I'm obsessed with giving you borrowed permission to pursue your creativity and to celebrate every tiny win along the way and to get more ambitious, whether that means towards a professional style of writing, semi-professional, or whether that means an ambition to be writing so much that it is part of your daily life, that it enhances everything else about your life. That's an ambition I can get behind. And you won't know what the right ambition for your writing is until you start putting processes in place to pursue it, until you let go of that award ceremony moment, that fantasy in your head of having that. You might get it, but that's not what's going to make writing and creativity worthwhile for you. We are a storytelling people. We are unable to observe the world and not try and make sense of things, not try and create patterns, not try and create meaning. Psychologists have studied this. It is impossible for us. It's a instantaneous reaction for us to observe something, whether it's a sound or an action or a person, and not start trying to process it and make meaning of it. That's what we do. This past week, I was in a casino for a concert. I was in a casino hotel for a concert. And I walked through the casino floor at about 11 o'clock at night. And it was one of the most depressing experiences of my life. Good for you if you enjoy going to the casino, but none of the people I saw that weekday night looked like they were having fun. They looked like they were trying to deaden something inside them. They were trying not to have expectations. They were trying not to have ambition. because our culture doesn't tend to support that. If you don't have a lot of money, you shouldn't be allowed to have leisure time, or you shouldn't be allowed to be fulfilled. The process of creating space in their life for writing is I see them letting go of a whole bunch of myths. The myth that you have to want to be published, the myth that you have to be on the New York Times bestseller list before you can be proud of being a writer. The myth that you have to do this before you can do that. The myth that you can only feel successful when you have external validation. The myth that you need to be working on other people's stuff all the time and your stuff, the stuff that makes you fulfilled, can wait until you're retired or wait for another day. The myth that you can't call yourself a writer until you've done X, Y, or Z. I'm obsessed with helping you drop those myths. This week I'm opening up again the Story a Day Superstars group, which I've been building since 2018. I wasn't really sure what it was going to be at first, but we got together and we wrote, and it's grown into a group of 50 or 60 people who show up and hang out and talk about writing, who show up for writing sprints and get their work done, who support each other, who take part in our critique weeks and learn a ton from critiquing other people's work and from having other people talk about their stories. Mostly, I think what Superstars does for people is it creates a place where they can come and be a writer and really feel that permission. It creates a sanctuary where you can be a writer with other people who understand what you're trying to do. It creates a place where you can share information about craft techniques that you've learned, teachers you've discovered who are awesome, conferences you want to go to, agents who've put out calls for manuscripts, ways to stay connected to your writing when you go on vacation. What else have we talked about recently? Festivals, and we talk about life. We create space for writing. We create the process of incorporating writing and creativity into your life. The people in this group are not just writing. People knit, people do cross-stitch, people do woodwork, people do board gaming. These are very creative people with day jobs, with grandchildren, with homes to look after, with disabilities, with all kinds of challenges, who show up for themselves and for each other to put writing and creativity in a central place in their day. It's been an amazing experience to lead this group and to see other people in the group lead each other down avenues that they're interested in, whether it's memoir or sci-fi. It's been really fun for me to see, as the world has opened up a little bit, for me to see members of the group intentionally getting together in the real world at conferences or for lunches or because they happen to be passing through each other's state and getting together with new friends who you never have to have any small talk with because you've got your writing in common. And I get these pictures of my superstars who I normally just see on little boxes on screens, and they're in the same shot together, and it's really fun. So it's a really lovely group. But apart from just being a lovely group of people, this Superstars group is a means to creating a writing life over the long term. It's a 1-year commitment to join the group, and I'm quite intentional about getting people into the group, getting them to meet each other, getting them to really feel like part of the community, which is why I only open it a couple of times a year. Because when we're in this together, it's so much easier for each of us, if you're having a bad day, or if you're having a good day, to contribute, to get the benefit of being in the group, and to live a life that is fully human, that acknowledges all the best things about you, that encourages you to be your best version of yourself, to aspire to be a writer, to have ambition for yourself, not necessarily professional ambition. I keep stressing that because it's fine if you want that, but the rest of the world is already telling you you need to be a professional writer if you want to call yourself a writer. And I am not going to do that. I think you need to have ambition to be someone who tells stories that matter. But if you start there, that's kind of a scary ambition. Your first thing I want to encourage you to have an ambition for is to be someone who takes time for their creativity, someone who writes anything, someone who writes regularly, someone who explores, who falls down and gets back up again, someone who writes stories that really don't work out and says, okay, I learned something from that. Let me write the next story. And that is so hard to do alone. We have too many negative voices in our heads telling us what matters, trying to keep us safe. And being creative doesn't feel safe. It feels exhilarating. It feels risky. It feels deeply satisfying and uncomfortable. Of course, it's hard to start writing again tomorrow. Why do I keep forgetting how good it feels to write? Many people have asked me. I have asked myself. We forget how good it feels to write because it also feels uncomfortable and difficult and risky. And we are not programmed for that after the age of 7. We become risk averse, and creativity is risky. I want you to think of superstars as kind of like a big ball pit, bouncy castle, something where you can play and you can fall down and you can laugh with your friends. And the risk and the thrill is still there. It's just like in a bouncy castle, you know, when you do that big high bounce and you're not sure if you're in control, and then you come back down and everyone laughs and you're probably not going to hurt yourself. That's what I want you to think of superstars as. Great big bouncy castle. And we want you to come and join us. It's a really big bouncy castle. We've got room for you. It's opening up this week. I'm obsessed with getting as many people as I can to understand that creativity and telling your stories is an essential part of a healthy, happy life. I'm obsessed with creating spaces and methodologies and processes that help you act on that belief, internalize it, make it your own, and go forward into life on purpose, happy, fulfilled, joyous, exhilarated. I don't know where to go from there. I love working with creative people. I love being a creative person. I love hearing people's stories. Stories I could never have imagined, never could have told. But you can, because they come out of your experiences. And they enrich the lives of the people you share them with. We are not little islands in the sea. We are social creatures, whether or not we actually like to be in this other same room with people. We are all connected. We are connected physically. We are connected through history to the future. And our stories are what connects us. If you're interested in finding a place to support you in your creativity, come over to Story a Day this week. Check out the links for the Superstars group. And I hope I'll see you inside.
Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and of course, keep writing.